When a person grows up almost entirely in public, every physical change they experience becomes available for commentary from people who feel they have some claim over the image they have been watching since childhood. Bindi Irwin has been watched since she was 2 years old, when she first appeared on The Crocodile Hunter alongside her father Steve Irwin. She was 8 when he died and stood at his memorial service and delivered a speech to 300 million viewers without assistance. She was 17 when she won Dancing with the Stars. She was 21 when she married Chandler Powell in an empty Crocodile Hunter theater on the morning of the first COVID-19 lockdown, with only her mother and brother present. And across all of those years, through all of those public milestones, her appearance has been watched and discussed and commented on with the specific casualness that public life both invites and cannot entirely protect against. The transformation that has generated sustained commentary in recent years, the visible physical changes that audiences have noticed and speculated about, is not a story about a celebrity deciding to look different. It is a story about a decade of undiagnosed and undertreated illness finally being addressed, and about what a body looks like when it has been carrying that kind of sustained internal damage and is finally allowed to begin healing from it. Bindi Sue Irwin was born on July 24, 1998, in Buderim, Queensland, Australia, according to her documented biography. Her father Steve Irwin named her after Bindi, a saltwater crocodile at Australia Zoo who was his personal favorite, with the word Bindi meaning young girl in an Australian Aboriginal language, and her middle name Sue came from the family's longtime dog. She grew up on the grounds of Australia Zoo in Beerwah, Queensland, homeschooled within the environment her parents had built, learning about wildlife conservation and animal care alongside conventional subjects in a setting that was anything but conventional. Her first television appearance came at the age of 2, according to documented records of her career, when she appeared on her father's series The Crocodile Hunter. Steve Irwin's enthusiasm for his daughter's interest in wildlife was visible in every documented interview and appearance he made during her early childhood, and the relationship between father and daughter was something the audience that watched The Crocodile Hunter recognized as genuine rather than performed for the cameras. Steve Irwin died on September 4, 2006, when Bindi was 8 years old, according to documented records of his death. He was filming a documentary called Ocean's Deadliest near Bat Reef in Queensland when a stingray's barb pierced his chest, and he died at the scene. The news traveled across the world within hours, and the response from the global audience that had followed his work across 15 years of television was one of genuine, sustained grief. A public memorial service was held on September 20, 2006, at the Crocoseum Arena at Australia Zoo, broadcast live to an estimated 300 million viewers across multiple countries, according to documented accounts of the event. Bindi walked to the microphone and delivered a tribute to her father without prompting and without visible adult management of what she was doing, describing who he was and what he had meant to her in language that an 8-year-old had clearly put together herself. The footage of that moment has been viewed and revisited many times since, and what it communicates consistently is that this was a child who had genuinely understood her father's purpose and intended to carry it forward, not a child who had been coached into performing grief for a global audience. In 2007, she began hosting her own documentary series, Bindi the Jungle Girl, broadcast on Discovery Kids, which earned her a Daytime Emmy Award in 2008 for Outstanding Performer in a Children's Series, according to documented Emmy Award records, making her at 10 years old the youngest person in the show's history to receive that recognition. The career that followed across her teenage years demonstrated the specific kind of sustained professional discipline that comes from someone who genuinely loves the work rather than from someone fulfilling an obligation. She appeared in the 2010 film Free Willy, Escape from Pirates Cove, and the 2013 film Return to Nims Island, according to her documented filmography. She completed qualifications in business and tourism at TAFE Queensland East Coast, according to documented accounts of her education, building the practical foundation that would eventually support her role in managing Australia Zoo's operations alongside her mother Terry and brother Robert. Her decision in March 2014 to partner with SeaWorld Entertainment in a campaign called Generation Nature generated immediate and substantial criticism, according to documented reporting on the controversy. The campaign was announced while the boycott movement against SeaWorld was intensifying in the aftermath of the documentary Blackfish, which had brought widespread public attention to the conditions in which killer whales were kept in captivity. PETA and conservation groups criticized the partnership publicly, arguing that it contradicted the conservation philosophy her father had embodied. Australia Zoo representatives responded that the partnership was intended to educate young people and create change from within existing systems, according to documented statements from the family. The controversy was Bindi's first significant public lesson in how the conservation work she had inherited from her father could be complicated and contested in ways that Steve Irwin's own career had not always had to navigate in the same way. In the fall of 2015, She competed in the 21st season of Dancing with the Stars, paired with professional dancer Derek Hough, according to documented records of that season. Because Bindi was 17 and an Australian citizen, the production required legal documentation confirming her father's death before contracts could be finalized, according to reported accounts of the administrative process. The visual contrast between the image most of the American viewing audience associated with her, a young girl in khaki surrounded by wildlife, and the sequined competition wear and theatrical makeup of the show's format, generated immediate and extensive commentary. Some of it was genuinely celebratory, recognizing a teenager stepping into an adult performance context with considerable confidence and ability. Some of it was the reflexive discomfort that audiences sometimes express when a child they have watched on screen begins visibly growing into an adult. On November 24, 2015, she and Derek Hough won the competition, according to documented results of that season. Their finale performance, dedicated to Steve Irwin, received perfect scores from the judges and produced one of the most genuinely emotional moments in the show's documented history. She met Chandler Powell in 2013 when the American professional wakeboarder visited Australia's zoo during a trip, according to documented accounts of how they met. Their relationship developed over several years, and Powell proposed on her 21st birthday on July 24, 2019, according to documented reporting on the engagement. They planned a wedding at Australia Zoo for March 25, 2020. On the morning of the ceremony, the Australian government announced emergency lockdown regulations in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, according to documented reporting on the timeline of Australian public health measures during that period. Rather than postpone the wedding, Bindi and Chandler proceeded with the ceremony as scheduled, with only Terry Irwin and Robert Irwin present, according to documented accounts of the event. Bindi posted about the day on social media afterward, describing the circumstances honestly and framing the choice to proceed despite the absence of guests as a reflection of how much the marriage itself mattered rather than the event surrounding it. Grace Warrior Irwin Powell was born on March 25, 2021, exactly 1 year after the wedding, according to documented records of her birth. The middle name Warrior was chosen as a connection to the Wildlife Warrior mission central to the Irwin family's conservation identity, while the name Grace honored a great-grandmother. The birth received enormous media attention, and the period that followed introduced public pressures that intersected with Bindi's ongoing but still publicly unknown health difficulties in ways that the audience watching her at the time could not fully understand. In June 2021, on Father's Day, Bindi published a statement on her social media accounts addressing the long-standing public questions about her grandfather Bob Irwin's absence from family life, according to documented reporting on the statement. She shared that Bob Irwin had subjected her family to emotionally damaging behavior across many years, including refusing gifts, returning letters, and cutting off all contact with his children and grandchildren. Bob Irwin had previously spoken publicly about his estrangement from the family in terms that presented a different account of the dynamics involved, and the Father's Day statement made the private family conflict visible to the public audience that had long wondered about his absence from Australia Zoo events and Irwin family media. The revelation generated extensive coverage across Australian and international entertainment media. Bindi subsequently stepped away from social media for a period to protect her mental well-being and the peace of her immediate family, according to documented reporting on the break. The health story that explains the most significant dimension of Bindi's physical transformation across recent years began much earlier than most of her audience realized. She began experiencing severe abdominal cramps, persistent exhaustion, and prolonged nausea from the age of approximately 14, according to her own documented accounts of the illness in multiple interviews and social media posts. 4 years across her teenage years and into her 20s, she sought medical assessment for these symptoms and received diagnoses that characterized them as normal physiological variation or stress-related responses to her demanding work schedule, according to her documented accounts of the diagnostic process. The pain continued and worsened without a clear underlying explanation being identified. The symptoms intensified during her pregnancy with Grace, according to her documented accounts of that period, with severe pain appearing with increasing frequency that caused genuine fear for her pregnancy's safety. The combination of pregnancy-related physical changes and undertreated endometriosis created a period of sustained physical suffering that she managed largely without public disclosure of its severity. After Grace's birth, the symptoms continued and the exhaustion visible in her public appearances during that period reflected a physical reality considerably more serious than postpartum fatigue. In March 2023, she traveled to New York for specialist examination under the care of Dr. Tamer Sekin, a gynecological surgeon known for his expertise in endometriosis diagnosis and treatment, according to documented reporting on the procedure. Diagnostic excision surgery revealed 37 endometriosis lesions and a large ovarian cyst attached to the abdominal wall, according to her own public disclosure of the surgical findings in a post shared from her hospital bed on March 9, 2023. The lesions and cyst were successfully removed. She shared the news publicly with deliberate transparency, describing the 10 years during which her symptoms had been dismissed or misidentified, and urging other women to take their own pain seriously and persist in seeking accurate diagnosis. The disclosure generated widespread attention and discussion about endometriosis, a condition affecting approximately 1 in 10 women but frequently underdiagnosed for years or decades, according to documented medical literature on the condition. Her willingness to share the experience openly was recognized across women's health advocacy communities as a significant contribution to public awareness. In May 2025, she was notably absent from the Steve Irwin Gala in Las Vegas, an event she would normally have been expected to attend, according to documented reporting on her absence. She was admitted to Lenox Hill Hospital in New York for emergency surgery to remove a severely inflamed appendix, according to documented reporting on the procedure. During the appendectomy, the surgical team discovered and treated 14 additional endometriosis lesions and repaired a hernia connected to her childbirth, according to documented accounts of the surgical findings. The cumulative total of endometriosis lesions removed across her documented surgical procedures exceeded 50, a number that gives some indication of the extent to which the condition had progressed across the decade during which it went undiagnosed and untreated. The physical changes visible in her appearance in the period following these surgical interventions are directly connected to that medical history. The removal of significant tissue pathology and the treatment of a condition that had been causing chronic inflammation, pain, and disruption to her body's normal function for a decade produces observable physical changes that are entirely distinct from the deliberate cosmetic alterations that celebrity appearance commentary typically addresses. She has spoken in documented interviews about the renewed energy and physical well-being she experienced following the successful treatment, describing a quality of daily life that the chronic pain had made unavailable to her for years. The transformation that her audience has been commenting on is the visible result of a body recovering from a decade of undertreated illness and responding to that recovery with the kind of physical change that genuine health improvement produces. She has assumed an active senior leadership role at Australia Zoo alongside Terry and Robert, according to documented reporting on her professional responsibilities, overseeing conservation operations, managing the Crocodile Hunter Lodge Resort project, and directing international fundraising activities for wildlife warriors worldwide. Her professional role represents the practical culmination of the business and tourism qualifications she pursued, the conservation education she received from childhood, and the public profile she built across years of television work, all applied toward the specific institutional mission her father established and that her family has sustained and expanded since his death. Her daughter Grace, born in 2021, has appeared alongside the family at conservation events and educational programs with increasing frequency as she has grown, continuing the three-generation pattern of Irwin family engagement with Australia Zoo and wildlife conservation that began with Steve Irwin's parents Lynn and Bob establishing the park decades ago. Bindi has documented Grace's early encounters with animals through her social media, maintaining the same quality of genuine enthusiasm for wildlife that has characterized the Irwin family's public presence throughout its history, and that no amount of media scrutiny or personal difficulty across her adult years has managed to replace with something more calculated or performed. The transformation that has been causing a stir, to use the language of public commentary about her changing appearance, is not a mystery when the full documented account of what she has been through is assembled. It is the visible story of a woman who spent a decade in pain that was repeatedly misidentified or dismissed, who finally received accurate diagnosis and effective treatment, and whose body subsequently responded to that treatment in the ways that bodies respond when sustained pathology is removed and genuine recovery becomes possible. The stir it causes reflects the specific dynamic of public life that Bindi Irwin has navigated since she was 2 years old, which is that people who have been watching someone for a long time develop opinions about how that person should look and feel genuine curiosity when the appearance they have been tracking changes. The most accurate and honest answer to that curiosity is the one the documented record of her medical history provides. She spent 10 years sick. She finally got well. That is what the transformation actually represents.